So you finally face the situation in life where you need a charger slash cable slash plug-in situation. Good evening, welcome back to In the Hood. In this video I'm gonna talk about how you can achieve this cable charger plug-in situation using geometry nodes inside Blender. And you could do this for something like this, or you could use it for a phone charger, or whatever. The world's your oyster. So in solid mode this is very disturbing, so I'm gonna switch to flat shading and texture, and the later half of this video I'll explain how this texture situation also works in your solid viewport shading. So now you basically want to connect this part and this part. See over here at the bottom you see this little part. So I'm going to come in here, Shift A, add a plane. The mesh that you add really doesn't matter because we're gonna get rid of that. When inside geometry nodes, okay, you can't see my full screen. Inside of geometry nodes I'm going to click on new, or you can come in here and add a modifier the way you want to do it. Come home, and we're going to need some things from here as well. I'm going to keep snapping on, and we're going to pin this just in case. So here I'm going to just remove the group input. I will need it at some point, but right now I don't need it. And add two empties, and these two empties will basically determine where the spline will be. So we're going to add two empties here. So let me make a new collection. Call this GeoNodes test. Very important so that I don't mess up the things that I've already done here. So Shift A, empty sphere. I don't know why it makes such a huge null to begin with. We're gonna call this one cable start. I'm gonna duplicate this, call this cable end. Okay, drag these and drop it into our node tree here. Set these to relative, and let's just quickly snap to the start and end of it where we need it to be. Let me go into this object here. Go into the object here, this thing here. I'm going to go to face selection, Shift S, cursor to selected, and come on to object mode, select cable end, and say Shift S, selection to cursor. That brings it there. Just scale it down a little bit, and then I'm coming here into the plug. Okay, the bottom face selected, Shift S, cursor to selected, then come out into the object mode, cable start, Shift S, selection to cursor. Maybe scale it down a little bit. I can get rid of these parts, I don't need them. Yeah, can even get rid of the mesh. It is still lagging like crazy. Now inside a node tree I can do whatever I want to, but I can take any line or anything. So I'm going to take a curve line, Shift S, curve line, and for the start and end we're going to take the location of, just switch it up a little. Location goes into cable start for cable start, and end goes into end, and this we're going to output. So now you're going to see a straight line from here to here. If I just select my plane, this is going to make it visible. And currently there are only 2 points in here. If you look at the control points here, and there's one spline, 2 points. So of course we just don't want 2 points, we want to have a lot more points. So over here we can come in here and say Shift S, resample curve, and you can keep it on count, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it to length. So what that does is, if you see, the number of control points is now 8. If I take my end cable and I bring it out, like I extend it basically, you'll see the number of points will increase. If I select the heater again, it's become 12. And a good way to like visualize this is to have like an instance on points. So I'm going to come in here and instance on points. For this curve we're going to instance cubes. Let's just make it 0.1, 0.05. So you have these cubes here. Now if I was to take my cable end and move it, because it's set at length, I can just move this and the number of points will keep increasing in between to fill up the gap. This instance on points is just for our reference, got nothing to do with the actual thing that we're trying to do. Now once that is done, we need some form of displacement onto the mesh itself. I can just mute these so that I don't have to like, it's just for visualization. I can just come back to one line. There are a few points in between depending on the length. So now we need to add some form of displacement in between for these points. Like each of these we don't want to be a straight line, although if that's something that you're going for, you could do that as well. Shift A, S, set position and drop it here, and inside my offset I'm going to add a noise texture and I'm going to put it into the color. Where is it gone? It's come here. Okay, now by default what the noise texture does is it goes from 0 to 1, so you have to add a vector map, set it to subtract and subtract 0.5 so that your noise is centered between the 2 points that we had. Now you see that the first point and the end point have gotten jumbled up. There's something I'll cover how to fix that, but you also need some form of control here, so I'm going to shift D this and bring it to scale, so then that is something you can control, right, how much of the distortion there will be. Let's give something like this, and you can even play with this scale value to get a different sort of result. Let's leave it at that now. And this is going to be your displacement setup. You can make it a node group and do all sorts of stuff with it, use it, like reuse it later. But what I'm really interested in is making sure that the first point and the last point stays where it was and there is noise happening in between. So how do you do that? There is a node here called end selection, endpoint selection, and you want to plug this into the selection. Okay, so if I with start size 1 and end size 1, which is 1, the first vertex from the start and first vertex from the end, if I plug this into selection, what will happen is only the first and the last vertex will get that noise. Like if I was to come in here, you adjust the scale, you will see that only the first and the last point is getting affected, which is the inverse of what we're looking for. So to affect all the points in between except for the first and last point, you just need to bring in a math node and set it to subtract. You want to subtract 1 minus, but you want to bring it here in the bottom and subtract 1 from here. So now no matter what your noise is, it will always make sure it will happen only in the vertex and like vertices in between and not on the endpoints. So now what you want to do here is you want to give it some thickness, so or shift A S CTM gives you curve to mesh, and for profile curve we're going to add a curve circle. Okay, instead of setting the radius here, we're going to set curve radius over here, so we have a little more modular control over it. Okay, one thing is that the proceduralism is still here. Like if I was to select my endpoint and bring it out, you see that the cable is actually extending like it should. The only thing is you have to like play with the settings of the noise and displacement and everything to make sure it doesn't get all wonky like this. So for that, if you can come in here and go from length to count and increase the number of counts, it will get smoother after a certain point, but you have to then reduce some things here, like scale doesn't have to be so much. Take the scale down because we're making a cable after all, and even this scale you can play with it a little bit because we just need like a little bit of a movement, not anything drastic or something. Okay, and then at the end you can just add a material to it, some material. I think there's a rubber material somewhere here, so that does it. Now because you want it to move, let's say with this thing, with the heater, so I'm going to come in here and select anything in between, shift S selection to cursor selected, and I'm going to add another null here. Let's call this handle, and now this I'm going to parent to the handle, and this heater I'm going to parent it to the handle. So I say Control P, keep transform if it's jumping anywhere. Now if you move this, the heater should move and your cable should also move, right? Ideally this shouldn't be the case, like after some point the cable would actually stretch out, but in the animation you don't want to like make that happen, and then just stay with it like as long as you're going. And then even if you come in here and rotate this for like pouring in, the cable will also rotate accordingly. Now there is a way where you can actually align the first end here such that it is always perpendicular using curve, tilt and stuff like those. There's this video by Jonathan, he's the guy, Johnny Matthews, he's the guy who's actually made the nodes for GeoNodes. So in this video he talks about how you can do that. I am yet to experiment with that, so I'm not going over that in this video. But I think I've covered basically what I wanted to show here. Now apart from that, in the beginning I was talking about this. Yesterday I talked about two things that I wanted to experiment today, and I did that in the morning session today, where if you look at the character, so currently it's in the viewport shading. If you go in here and select texture and make it flat, this doesn't quite work like it should. Like if I was to go into my material preview, her jacket and everything looks very different. So the way that P2 Design in his video, he shows how you fix this is you come in here into shading. You see how long it's taking for me to save the Blender file? It is because I have kept all the characters with all the high 4K textures and everything in the same file. And I think there is like a better workflow where you keep all the characters and everything in a separate file and then append them in your working file, because this is not workable only, like if it's going to take so long to save. Because I understand that Blender is saving all these textures. Like I have like I think 4 or 5, 6 characters which are currently shut, so there's no need to calculate it, but still it's taking way too long to save. So if I come into my shading tab and you go into all these meshes, so example HG body, right here there is a huge node tree that human generator gives you, and with this selected you can see the color, the skin color. But if let's say you had the normal selected, you will see normal instead, right? Any node which is selected. So if I select color, that's when you see color. This for some reason is not working with the eyes. Same with the jacket. If I go to dress, shirt, jacket, if I go to jacket, over here there are textures for base color. Sorry, this is map. It says base color, but it's going into the mask. So here is also base color, which is giving this gray kind of thing, which is not the actual texture. What happens is it goes through a node here called HG something, and then it displays the actual color, which is this color. So I think there's a limitation you can't really get. Even for the short inside, if I select the base color, like if I select the normal, you get the right thing in the viewport. Roughness, I don't know, but base color is giving this kind of color, which I think is fine only. And other than that, for a little progress that I did today, I continued on the animation part itself. So if I play the animation from the very start, we have the camera panning out. I've shut the renders and everything to like work on optimizing the scene a little more. So she's dozing off. She pushes the chair away, gets up, starts to walk towards the pantry. There's a walk cycle comes to a halt, and in this panning shot what she does is, oh my god, what happened to the, okay, we changed the position of the heater, no? So this is something like change something somewhere and the domino effect. She's apparently coming and clicking the button for the heater. The heater will say, what's up with the other arm? So weird. And then in this shot we're gonna make her do some things. It's such an ambitious project. There's a ton that I'm getting to learn here, which is amazing. And I really don't know if it's going to get through or what is going to happen with it. But I mean, just the fact that I'm getting to work on something and learn so much in the process, I'm very grateful for it. And other than that, I think the other P2 Design video which I talked about, where you take the mesh and you divide into smaller parts and then you parent it to the bones of the armature instead of using the armature modifier, that was not going to work. That's just useless and way too much work. If I can just figure out how I can have all my characters and the textures that are associated with it in another Blender file and then use it as an asset and linked somehow, so that my actual working file is not as intense as it is getting right now, I think that will be great progress. So okay, that is all for today's documentation. Thank you so much for being in the code. I will catch you tomorrow. Peace.